Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Morgan Lemley. Morgan is an application reader and interviewer with the Professional Degree Programs Admissions team here at the Darden School of Business. And I recently caught up with her to talk about her background, what brought her to our team, what she enjoys about working with professional degree students, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Morgan Lemley. Morgan, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to see you. How is everything? How are you doing?
I'm good. I just got back from a nice, relaxing vacation, so I have a little bit of a summer glow. I'm sure it won't last very long because it's so hot outside. But, happy to be back and get back into it.
Yeah, I think today, 3 p.m., it's supposed to feel like it's 106 outside here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So I'm based in Chesapeake area, Virginia, so southeastern Virginia, and we're at 112 today.
Okay.
So hot.
Very warm. Very warm.
Very warm.
Well, we record these podcasts indoors for a reason. So maybe particularly helpful this time of year. But tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah. So again, my name is Morgan Lemley. I am an application reader and interviewer for Darden. I started 2 months ago, almost 3. But prior to that, I actually was part of the MBA recruiting team for Walmart. And I had been in that role for just over 7 years and with Walmart for a little over 8. And so when I left, my primary role was I actually was the primary point of contact for all of our, what we called our core schools, including Darden. So I worked with the schools on a day-to-day basis, putting together a strategy for the various programs that we recruited for, as well as kind of managed the Walmart brand on the schools, worked with faculty, staff, career services, all of that. But in total, I have north of about 20 years of recruiting experience. I worked for Dollar Tree's corporate office where I did corporate recruiting. And when I switched over to Walmart, I started recruiting for their marketing team down in Bentonville. So, like I said, I'm based in Chesapeake, Virginia. I was born and raised here. I did have a small stint in Baltimore for about 5 years. And then moved back here, started at Dollar Tree. I am married. I have 2 girls. I have one who's 10, she's going to the 5th grade. And then I have one who is 13, going in, she starts high school. So that's a new adventure for everybody. But yeah, that's me.
What do you enjoy about recruiting? Because obviously you're now in the admissions world, but you have extensive recruiting experience. What do you enjoy about recruiting?
Talking. Talking with people. So when I was in elementary school, junior high, I always got the feedback that I talked too much. And my mom's like, well, I think you need to find a career where talking is a main portion of that. And I was like, oh. So when I graduated from college, or when I went to college, I decided to get a degree in HR because I was like, I like people, I like talking. As I got further into HR, I realized there were lots of aspects of HR that I was like, this is just kind of a lot of paperwork and just not a lot of interaction with others, as one might actually think the opposite. But then I came across recruiting and I actually got a job right out of college, working at a recruiting firm in Baltimore. And I started as a recruiting assistant. I moved up to a researcher and became a recruiter focused on accounting and finance roles. And then when I moved back to Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, I realized I didn't like the sales aspect of it. So I was like, I'm going to make the switch over to corporate because I was also missing a piece. The one thing I liked about recruiting was I got to see people. You bring them into the organization and then you get to see them thrive and grow and, eventually sometimes even become your hiring managers where you get to work with them on the other side. When you work for an agency, you don't really have that piece. It's kind of like You put them in there and then you move on. Sometimes they come back and they're hiring manager for you, but not very often. And so I really liked seeing the people that I brought into the organization and how they, added to the organization, and things of that nature. So
What attracted you to the role that you're in at Darden? It's a little different than what you've done
yeah,
before.
it is. So Darden was always one of my favorite schools when I was at Walmart. One, because since I was so close, I got to go and, be there for company presentations and coffee chats. And so by the nature of that, I also got to know the people a little bit more because I was seeing them in person. And I am born and raised in Virginia, so I am very familiar with the University of Virginia as well as Darden. But I also liked the role itself, where it allowed me to use a lot of the skills that I had in recruiting and just kind of putting them into a different purpose. So rather than my main focus being as the students were exiting the school and kind of moving into their next role, I get to kind of be on the opposite side and have, conversations about Darden and, the great program that we have and how it works into working professionals' lives and really kind of going that and knowing the school and working with the school previously and believing in the education and the community that Darden has. I think it was a natural fit.
So imagine in your role at Walmart, you were likely working most closely with full-time MBA students. Now you're here working with working professional students, or part-time MBA and executive MBA
Yes.
students. What have you enjoyed about working with working professional students?
I think the main thing that I really like is I'm amazed how they can manage both getting their MBA as well as whether it's an executive MBA or a part-time. I am um, impressed how they are able to balance that and their personal lives and just other things that are going on, because it is a big lift. I mean, having a full-time job these days, what do they call it? The infinite calendar now, right? Where it just never ends. Having a full-time job while also getting, an MBA, they're both really big lifts. And obviously people also have personal lives and families and kids and animals and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really impressed the way working professionals, have the dedication and they really do are able to, not saying it's always all balanced, but, bring their best selves, in the interactions that I've had with them.
So if someone schedules a conversation or perhaps has an interview, they could run into you. You also read applications as well for part-time MBA and executive MBA. Do you have any favorite advice that you share with applicants, people who are thinking about, applying to one of these programs?
Yeah, I think the most feedback I have is usually around the short answer question responses. Um, because I think a lot of times people sometimes put in there what they think we want to see or read in their application. And it's usually those that kind of come up flat, I found. Where really what I think your short answer question should come through with is your genuine self. I think sometimes people are afraid to be too personal in them, and obviously there's a line. But some of my favorite applications reads, like I remember, are ones that are sharing, something about their favorite hobby that, it can be something as easy as running, but why is it important to them? So, the question this year was tell us something about something that you want students to know as part of your class. And I learned somebody, was an avid baker and how, that's really come to be kind of a space of peace for her. My favorite one was where somebody came in and they were describing how they were a gardener. What they did was amazing because they brought in how they were a gardener, but then they turned it into a strategic plan and how they bring the same thought process to when they're figuring out next steps in their career, or whether to take an MBA because it's about planning what are going to be this year's plants as opposed to plants you want to see come back over time. And so I think it's a way for people to get to know you and not just be, I like to read. well, what do you like to read? Why do you like to read? How did you get into that genre? So while you have a word limit, obviously, so that can get a little tricky, you have to be a little more thoughtful with your answer, but kind of sharing more about you rather than kind of what you think we want to read and what we want to see on the page.
Yeah, when you think about the various parts of the application, certainly the short answers are a great opportunity for us to hear someone's voice and begin to get a
Mhm.
sense of your personality and experiences that you've
Yeah.
had. Probably some of the most personal parts of the application
Hmm.
is one way to think about it. And I do agree with you. When people focus too much on the audience and what they think we want to read, it's really a missed opportunity. And
Yeah.
those responses tend to read in a very kind of generic way. Doesn't feel as authentic, I guess, is a
Yeah.
way of saying it.
And I've even read an application and I've had questions, especially when you're looking at, maybe somebody's GPA from undergrad or something like that. And then they bring it up. So it shows me they have self awareness. They know that maybe is a weaker spot in their resume, but they bring it and they share the learnings of, hey, I didn't do great in undergrad. This is kind of why, but this is how I, learned from my mistakes and have, kind of moved past that and grown from it.
Yeah, we're very much interested in trying to get a sense of who someone is
Hmm.
right now. We recognize,
Yeah.
for you think about our executive MBA candidates, many of them are, 11, 12, 13 plus years into their career. That's sort of the average years of work experience in our executive MBA program. It's been a while since undergrad. It's been likely
Yeah.
a while since their last degree related
Right.
experience. And so
And a lot can happen.
that's right. That's right. A lot can happen, a lot can change. And oftentimes when we talk to people about, coming back to school, sometimes it's about, writing a different story for themselves in
Mhm.
school and being able to have a different kind of experience now that they have this perspective and they're removed from their undergrad and they would do
Mhm.
it differently if they had a chance to. And guess what? An MBA program is a chance to do it differently.
Exactly. Yep.
So what are you looking forward to in the months ahead, Morgan?
Well, I'm looking forward to being involved kind of in the planning process for the upcoming year. And then really just I don't, not in a bad way, but I love a fresh start. Like I love when my kids go back to school for lots of reasons, but I really just love it's a fresh start for everyone. Right. And so as this current cycle wraps up in the next few weeks, we kind of go into planning. It'll be my first kind of planning session with you guys. So I'm looking forward to going through that and then being a part of the next cycle kind of from, start to finish and seeing the class kind of for the both programs kind of come together and I always just enjoy reading the applications. I prefer to read applications in the morning with a cup of coffee when my house is quiet, or at night when my house is quiet, especially in these summer months when I'm juggling lots of different priorities. But really just being involved in the process from start to finish.
Yeah, our executive MBA process from an application evaluation standpoint runs from kind of August or so to July.
Yeah.
Part-time MBA is not too different. It's kind of August to
Yep.
June or so.
Yep.
So it doesn't leave us a lot of
No.
downtime. And so we'll start the planning process kind of mid to late July with an eye towards launching the new applications for both the executive MBA class
Mhm.
and the part-time MBA class. These would be the classes enrolling August 2026. We'll look to launch those sometime in mid-August, typically right around the first week of school when students are coming for their week-long residencies in Charlottesville. That's the week when we typically will launch the new applications, and then we'll be right back at it again. But
That's right.
that will be your first time going through the full cycle. Recognize you joined our team. We had maybe kind of very much everything underway and
Yeah.
maybe just a few more months to go in the cycle. It'd be nice for you to see the full arc of
Yeah.
everything.
Yes. Very excited.
Well, any final advice? Anything else you'd encourage people to think about as they consider their own MBA journeys?
I think find a place where you feel comfortable. Find a place that fits. You're going to spend a lot of time with these people, whether it's in person or in a virtual, right? You have the learning teams. There's a lot of interactions, constant interactions. So you're going to be with not only the students, but the faculty and the staff. And so find some place that feels like a good fit for you. Obviously, you want it to align with kind of your career goals and what you want to do. And different programs fit different people for different reasons. Um, And then in terms of kind of when you're thinking about pulling together your application and going through an interview, really bringing kind of goes back to the feedback I gave back on the short answer questions, but bringing your genuine self and not who you think we want to see. Um, because those are the applicants that stand out to me. When I think about applications and interviews, it's the ones who I can tell really thought about their application or thought about their story for their interview. Um, so,
Yeah, finding somewhere that you feel comfortable. It's funny when we talk to candidates who, well, at least folks who end up here at Darden, about how they made the choice, brand, reputation, ranking, that kind of thing, that comes into the consideration
mhm,
process, certainly. But when it comes down to where people decide to go, things like culture, the learning
yeah,
experience, the other people who are going to be in the room, how they relate to each other,
mhm,
perhaps coming for a class visit and seeing it in person, or
yeah,
connecting with some current students and hearing firsthand from their perspective. Those are the things that I get the sense of that
yeah,
typically shape people's decisions.
yeah. And I think one of the things, based on the different conversations I've had with potential applicants, that the case method that Darden offers really typically it's either a I'm on board, I'm ready for this. It's kind of the best way that I learn and active learning. And others are who maybe are more of a head down listening note, like traditional kind of what you think of when you think of a college class or a graduate level class. Um, but I think that those that want that active participation and that active learning, um, will walk away from the program, with a lot more than just, the typical MBA.
Yeah, we always tell folks that they have to be interested in the experience here
Yeah.
because the case method is going to ask a lot more of students in terms of
Yeah.
how they show up in class and their willingness
Mhm.
to engage. You
Yeah.
can't say, "Oh, I'm just going to listen for this
Yeah.
one."
You'll get cold called real fast.
Yeah, and it must be interesting, having been on that sort of recruiter side and engaging with Darden students and hearing about the case method that way too, or just knowing a little bit about the learning experience that students were going through. It is different from
It
other
is
places.
different. But typically, what we find with what I found when I was on the other side, they did way better in interviews. And then when we would have students come for their internship, they were a lot quicker to join into their teams and join into the conversations that were happening at the tables where you could see some other interns who maybe it wasn't the primary method of learning at their program were usually maybe a little more standoffish and just kind of trying to read the room first. Where I just think after it, these were clearly full-time students. So after a year of this constant type of learning that they had, it was second nature to them at that point. So it didn't matter what room. I mean, obviously they listened to what they were talking about, but they were not afraid to speak up and give their opinion or contribute to the conversation, which I think um, really speaks out. When we were bringing in a program at Walmart that had, merchandising sometimes would bring in 25 to 30 interns just for that program. You have to make yourself stand out. And that usually did it.
Yeah, and I think the lessons hold true across all of our programs. So
Mhm.
when you think about what you're asked to do at Darden, it's, you get a case. It may not be an
Yeah,
area that you have a lot of background with, but you still have to be prepared for class and show up with a perspective of what you think should happen and what
yeah,
decisions should be made. And you might have questions. Other people will have perspectives as well. But you have to be able to articulate your kind of idea and do it in a way that's inclusive or at least mindful that not everybody in the room shares your background or may not
yeah.
necessarily know intimately, exactly what you're talking about. So you have to explain it in a way that can be appreciated by a wide audience, and you have to be willing to pivot. And I mean, there's so
Mhm.
many skills just baked into the case method. And I'm not surprised to hear that Darden students were comfortable collaborating, comfortable speaking up, comfortable engaging in these kinds of conversations, because
Yeah.
that's absolutely what you do.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits too on the working professional side is, you can go, you're going to work, right? So you've got, let's say you're an executive MBA, you come in for a weekend residency and then you go back to, your job. And maybe you learned something, picked up something that week, whether it was from the case you actually learned or just the conversation that happened in the room in one of the classes that you took over the weekend. And you get to apply and it comes up or you find it relevant in, a meeting you're in 3 days later. You get to apply those learnings, as they come up. Whereas, the full-time students, well, it's a wonderful format and perfect for some people. They're going a whole, 9-10 months of classroom. They get an internship where they can apply it, and then they do another year of classroom, and then they go in where I think with the leg up part-time and executive have is they have the opportunity to kind of use the skills as they're learning them. And I think that also helps when they come back, they, have, real time experiences to kind of share back, say, with the class.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why when people ask us about full-time versus part-time or full-time versus executive MBA, we always tell folks to think about it as trade-offs, not pro and con. There's no con here. You're going to go to Darden, you're going to get a great education, you can graduate with a Darden MBA. It's really kind of thinking about your experience and what you have in mind when you think about that experience. And there's benefits to taking 2 years off and to be fully immersed in an MBA program, but there's also a lot of benefits to working while pursuing your degree, as you note. Taking what you're learning in class and applying it at work, and also bringing challenges from work into the classroom and talking with your classmates and maybe even faculty about some things that you're experiencing. It's really just about finding, kind of coming back to your earlier point about finding the path that makes sense for you. And there's different ways to think about it, and I think that's where our team can be really helpful. Getting back to the idea that we offer conversations and ways to engage. A lot of time on those conversations is spent helping people think through these kinds of things.
Exactly. And just talking through the differences in the different formats and getting a better understanding of, what's currently happening in the potential students, career. Are they in a stable role that they've been in for a while where they feel comfortable taking on, another heavy lift? I had one conversation with a gentleman who is about to, I think it's about a year and a half, 18 months, he's retiring from the military. And he was really unsure about whether to apply to start in August of 2025 or start in August of 2026. And I said, well, that would be a lot of fresh starts happening in 2026 for you, where if you're in a good role now might be a better spot. So it's really thinking about, what does your current landscape look like and what program, what format? Timing is important. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who just graduated from college, but he knows he wants to get an MBA in the next 3 or 4 years. And so he's like, I'm just going to kind of start gathering information and start having conversations and understand the different programs that are around me at a deeper level. So lots of different people come through the conversations in different parts of their journey in terms of, am I just starting out to get information? Am I ready to pull the plug? So not pull the plug, but kind of, go through and kind of submit the application.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I know our prospective students will look forward to engaging with you. The fun thing about this podcast is oftentimes when these episodes publish, you might have a person or two say, hey, I listened to your podcast. I know a little bit about you.
I look forward to it. I have one tomorrow. All my new conversation times will be up for July and August by the end of the week. So I look forward to having lots of future conversations.
And that was my conversation with Morgan Lemley, an application reader and interviewer with our professional degree programs admissions team here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.